The Black Ship, Chapter 54, Part 2. "I'm never going to not be impressed by that spinal mount weapon," commented Nultar in a serious tone that didn't fit his sentiment. "5 large freighters moving to intercept with over 300 small craft closing in, sir. They won't let us reach their cargo and transport vessels without putting up a fight." Wyatt hummed to himself, watching the chaos unfolding across the pirates' raiding fleet. In his mind, several ideas manifested themselves, all of them giving him a path to clear out the opposition in front of them in order to fulfill their objective, prevent their transport and cargo freighters from escaping and, more importantly, disable them before they could start rounding up people and taking them up as slaves. Lady Sabraska was right about one thing. Better for them to die at our hands than live as the playthings of these animals, Wyatt thought, eyes focused on his tactical display as their trajectory kept them far away from the path of 2 more favorable travel vectors. But it'll be better if we don't have to kill them at all, or keep their sacrifices as little as possible, he reminded himself, fire burning in his heart as anger pounded against his ears. He knew there would be many they couldn't save. Already too many had been lost, and hundreds, maybe tens of thousands more would die in the coming hours. Resources, credits, plunder. That he could understand. Stuff was stuff, and there was always more of it. But lives? Wyatt shook his head, driving away such thoughts. He needed to focus on the task at hand. In the end, every sacrifice, every innocent life claimed by the pirates, be they through their actions or by their hands, would be avenged by the blood of 10 of those criminals unworthy of mercy, consideration, or empathy. He had none to offer their kind. "We'll push through their fighters. Focus on the leading ships," he began with a tone that carried both certainty and confidence. "Their shields must be close to full depletion. Destroy their PD turrets and plant tactical mines on their hulls. Set a timed detonation. Let's save our remaining haywire mines for their cargo freighters." After a series of confirmations, Leopold's voice came to him. "Boss, an idea. How about our dear Count Osgar talks to the pirates again? You know, give them a good scare? Rattle them up a bit?" "The drone's gone, Leo." "That deception won't work," Gregor pointed out. "I believe Leo has a point, Gregor. It doesn't have to work the same way. Think about it. What if Lord Snifflegotch reveals himself to not only be alive but ready to claim their heads?" Nultar asked in a mocking tone. Raquel's chuckle was heard before she joined in the conversation. "After what happened, their morale must be nearly depleted. What do you say, sir? Mind giving them a little push over the edge?" Wyatt smiled. "That doesn't sound like a bad idea," he said, feeling a sensation of vindictive delight course through his spine. Beatties, there was no reason to give the pirates any peace of mind whatsoever. Clearing his throat, he opened his comms channel on all frequencies, ready to give a short-range general broadcast. "My, what beautiful fireworks your ships have created for my amusement and enjoyment. It is almost pitiful that such a wondrous display can only be repeated a few more times before all your ships are destroyed." Wyatt let out a little laugh, complete with a few snorts to seal his performance. "Dare I say that you, my dearest pirate scum, proved to be far more accommodating than I expected you to be. Know that your lives are a worthy sacrifice upon the altar of my Count Osgar von Snifflegotch's glory. The blue lance has pierced your chest. Now I will gash your unruly hide. Prepare yourselves. Make peace with the void while you still can." He finished the impromptu speech, feeling a lot less dirty than the first time. "You do realize we have no other choice but to share a drink with our flamboyant 6th member now, right?" joked Nultar with a grin that Wyatt knew was plastered on his lips. Well, that sure rattled them up. Their small craft is pushing forward even more. "All hail Lord Snifflegotch!" Leopold joined in with the reverence and submission that could only come from a commoner. "Please cease your empty platitudes of mockery, Dakar. For you now bear a noble title yourself," Gregor said firmly, though there was a hint of humor in his tone. "As much as I'm enjoying this moment or reprieve before battle resumes, look at your tactical displays. Sir, you were right. These motherless slaving despots tried to plant a trap. Should we eliminate them?" Raquel asked, her tone firm and serious. The momentary distraction passed, their focus shifted back to the task at hand. Wyatt narrowed his eyes as small, almost imperceptible dots appeared on the screen, clustered together to give away a trap. "These beasts are devoid of all honor and courage," chastised Gregor. "They are pirates. They don't have a shred of either to begin with," Raquel added. "Good call, sir. Although, if you don't mind me asking, how did you know?" "I didn't. But if I were in their place, that's what I would do. Royal Navy doctrine heavily favors confronting the enemy directly, and they've taken advantage of that up until now," Wyatt replied, pondering his options for a moment. Initially, the thought of sending a wedge to clear out the minefields crossed his mind, but as he opened his mouth to give the order, another idea came to him. Expanding the view of his tactical display, he saw the rest of the pirate's small craft, deployed to intercept Commander Redford's initial barrage. He didn't know how many were destroyed in the explosion, but it couldn't have been many, if any at all. They were in a near-complete disarray. Vulnerable? But first, he needed to deal with the force sent to stop them. 5 freighters, about half their fighters, and what appeared to be their remaining gunships. Checking his systems again, a soft hum rumbled in his throat. He had 83% coil gun ammunition, his shields had recharged, his flares were at 60%, and he could fire his railgun turret 5 more times. The simulations had been good, but actual combat exceeded his already high expectations. "There's no way I'm not asking Jincho to keep the railgun. I'll drop to my knees and beg Clara if I must. Though I believe that won't be a hard task," he thought to himself as he saw the pirate fighters approaching and leaving the protecting bubble of their freighters behind. The gunships followed closely behind, 15 more. A predatory security washed over him, filling him with that comfortable focus he could only find in the midst of a battle. The problem before him was simple: get to their objective in the first place. His order had been given, yes, but it wasn't final. To ignore the fighters or fight them. Now that was the real question. Inferior they were, but numbers were on their side. Worse, he was certain their fighters had restocked. The unanswered question was how many of their missiles they had used to counter the barrage. Outnumbered, but not outmaneuvered. Opening a link, he contacted the Reaper's Eye, quickly closing in on their position from an upward vector. "Lieutenant Commodore Tallulah Finnegan, this is Lieutenant Commodore Wyatt Staples speaking." "Do you read me?" It took only a moment for him to hear her voice. "This is Lieutenant Commodore Tallulah Finnegan." "I hear you clearly, Lieutenant Commodore." "We'll be within engagement range in a minute," she proclaimed, then continued. "Am I correct to assume this isn't a social call?" "Tell me what you require, Lord Staples." Wyatt wanted to protest about the use of Lord, but pushed it aside. Now was not the time to comment on a minor annoyance. "You are correct, Lady Finnegan." "Do you see the cluster of mines at coordinates X-109A?" There were a few seconds of silence before she replied. "I see it, Lord Staples. I also see that you've avoided it entirely. Is there any particular reason why you've brought such triviality to my attention?" Tallulah asked, in an inquisitive tone. "I've been informed that the Reaper's Eye was given a retrofit focused on support, scouting, and cyber warfare actions. Is it possible to scramble the enemy's sensors or create sensor ghosts for them to detect?" he asked, relieved beyond gratitude that Redford had seen it proper to broaden his knowledge on ship classifications, intended uses, and capabilities. "That was my intention, yes," Tallulah replied, sounding both confused and slightly disappointed at the same time. Wyatt narrowed his eyes slightly. "Is it possible to hide their own minds from them or create doubles? Fake clusters?" There was a momentary pause, long enough for him to wonder if he'd offended the noblewoman somehow. "It is possible. But why, may I ask?" "We'll use their minds against them. Tactical or haywire. It doesn't matter. We'll make use of them ourselves," he said flatly without missing a beat. "We'll lure as many of them as we can until the Reaper's Eye is in their visual range. They are angry and shaken. The sight of your black ship will shake them to the core. We'll drive them off toward their own minefield." Tallulah let out a brief, satisfactory chuckle. "I like the way you think, Lord Staples. I'll see to it then. Your onboard AIs will receive an encryption code that will help you all remain largely unaffected by the sensor distortion field." "Let loyalty be its own reward, for like water we strike," she declared proudly. "Victory shall suffice!" Wyatt replied, matching her enthusiasm. It was such a strange sensation, one that filled him with a sense of purpose he couldn't quite describe, but one that he liked. Everyone! My previous order is rescinded. Focus on the fighters. Strike as one, support each other, and overwhelm them one by one. Don't waste your missiles. Limit yourself to your coil guns. Taunt them, make them think you're completely outmatched, and then flee in the direction of the Reaper's eye. Once they turn tail and run like the cowards they are, we'll chase them into their own minefield. They were so kind to prepare it for us. Let them have it, ordered Wyatt with cold, calculated focus. After that, we'll deal with their freighters. Composters advance ahead of the formation. Focus on their gunships first. Sir! A cacophony of acknowledgments came through as he and his squad mates began to outpace the rest of the formation. With only seconds before entering into the engagement, Wyatt heard the alert that his fighter was being targeted, only to see a great barrage of missiles launched by the enemy small craft. There was no need for him to give an order to take evasive maneuvers. The formation spread slightly before unleashing a series of controlled coil gun bursts without altering their course. At the same time, Wyatt marked his target and carefully aimed at it. They were still far away from effective range, but that would change soon. Before that could happen, however, he saw nothing wrong in thinning their numbers as much as possible. A quick glance revealed that his squad mates had also selected their targets. Fire, he ordered, barely louder than a whisper. 5 seconds later, a series of small explosions signaled the elimination of a third of the oncoming missiles. Simultaneously, Wyatt saw his tactical display glitch for a moment before returning to normal. Still, the effect on the enemy was immediately evident. Their formations broke apart, and their sensors were being overwhelmed by false, disruptive signatures. Less than a second later, 5 gunships were struck nearly simultaneously, causing them to explode into a small ball of plasma as their reactors found themselves pierced completely. Engage! He ordered as he and his squad mates made a quick downward turn, releasing flares that overwhelmed the missile's now altered targeting sensors. The rest of their wing and a half followed suit, creating a sensor distortion cloud. Many missiles veered off in random directions, detonated, or simply stopped working altogether. Only a handful made it to their objectives, but not enough to fully deplete or damage any shields. With their sensors in disarray, the pirates had to rely on their external cameras, greatly limiting their coordination and tactical capabilities. Not waiting to give them a chance to recover or somehow counter the Reaper's Eye's disruption, he chose his next target carefully as the dogfight began in full. Following his orders, the squadrons remained united rather than having their individual members break off, as regular doctrine dictated. They were starting to support each other more, leaving behind the hunt for personal glory, even if it went against everything they believed in. The pirate fighters outnumbered 3-1, but they were inferior in both training and equipment. They had used most of their available missiles against Redford's barrage, leaving them significantly underpowered. Regardless of these facts, they had the guts and fury to fight with no other objective in mind but to kill every Astorian loyalist in front of them. A group of 18 fighters came after them, firing their weapons at them wildly. Alert. Enemy fire detected. Shields at 91%, warned the computer. With a swift turn that made him clench his teeth, he fired his coil guns in a controlled series of bursts. He watched as 2 of the fighters had their shield flare and then collapse before being pierced, their cockpits and pilots destroyed in the blink of an eye. On his tactical display, he saw another 7 of their pursuers turn into tumbling debris as his squad mates followed suit. The surviving half pressed on as their gunships and another contingent of 20 fighters joined the battle against them. Seeing his opening, he fired his railgun before turning to attack 3 more fighters. He only saw the signal of his targeted gunship disappear a moment later. Noltar pressed on with Gregor right behind him, the 2 friends quickly eliminating 5 more enemy fighters and heavily damaging 3 others. Leopold, surprisingly, wasn't shadowing anyone as 4 enemy fighters were in hot pursuit, his shields flaring and quickly depleting. With a quick maneuver that felt like a punch to the gut, but tolerable, he put his fighter into a spin as he fired wildly. 2 of the pursuers were destroyed in the act, their weak shields unable to protect them effectively. A 3rd fighter was crippled, whilst the fourth broke off, but his escape was thwarted as Raquel claimed it. A second later, her railgun fired and another gunship met its end as they joined the fray in full. Wyatt frowned as Raquel drove forth, confronting two gunships at once. Through his view screen, he saw that they were retrofitted haulers with strange, unknown markings painted across their hulls. Raquel possessed greater maneuverability as she opened fire on the first gunship, flaring its shields but withstanding the attack much better than a mere fighter. Then he saw their mounted PD turrets fire back, along with short-range missiles. Having fired her railgun so recently, it was still recharging, leaving her vulnerable for a few seconds. Decisive seconds that could prove the difference between life and death. As he prepared to join in, 5 fighters fired on him, depleting his shields to 57%. He turned to face them first, unable to ignore them at the moment. He turned abruptly, rotating to face his attackers, and opened fire, causing one fighter to fall in short order. Another one met its end a moment later, exploding when its reactor went critical rather than shutting down. The debris hit his closest ally, all but depleting its shields, leaving Wyatt the perfect opening to take it down. As he turned his attention back to Raquel, he saw her shields collapse as she made sharp, desperate shifts in her positioning that ended with her left wing being ripped apart. Her railgun, however, was aligned perfectly at the last second and fired, turning the cockpit of the first gunship into twisted metal and pieces of smeared flesh. But the second gunship, sensing the kill, moved in to claim it. It was stopped when Leopold fired his railgun and turned it into nothing more than scrap tumbling through the empty void of space. Damn it all! That was... Raquel began, but Wyatt interjected. We'll discuss that later, Otillo, Wyatt said, gritting his teeth as he took notice that a further 8 fighters had been destroyed. Cursing at the pirates in his mind, he saw that, despite their mounting losses, they were beginning to press against them now that they believed they had the upper hand. Now disengage! Rally to the Reaper's Eye! Composter 5, stay in the middle of the formation. I'll take the rear! He ordered, ignoring his last 2 assailants in favor of turning away from battle. It pleased him to see that every other squadron followed his instructions. His only solace was the fact that he'd leave no pilot behind, as the pirates preferred to outright destroy their objectives or remove the pilots just so they could scavenge and claim the debris for themselves. Afterburners were engaged just in time before the 5 freighters were close enough to actually be dangerous. The pirates gave chase, blinded by bloodlust and drunk in overconfidence. As they approached the Reaper's Eye, he saw that only 3 of the gunships remained and were burning toward them. Gregor Nultar, at my command, we'll do a hard spin. Mark a gunship. We'll take those bastards down once and for all. Leopold, cover Raquel. Understood, sir. Gladly. Count on it, boss, came their respective replies. Marking his target, he waited until he received confirmation from his 2 squad mates. Wyatt took in a deep breath, his heart beating hard and fast inside his chest as he felt the anticipation for the kill burn inside his stomach. Now! He ordered, and their engines died completely whilst their directional thrusters roared. The strain of the maneuver was hard on all of them, but thanks to the improved dampeners, it didn't go beyond highly uncomfortable. The spin lasted less than a second, yet during it, the mini railgun turret aligned itself with deadly precision and fired. The 3 gunships were gutted simultaneously. Only one exploded upon impact, the other 2 were merely crippled, but that was enough to take them out of the fight. But the destruction of their last gunships didn't deter the pirates for another half a minute. It was almost poetic, and it filled his heart with enormous contentment when he saw a little over 200 fighters suddenly break off the moment they got a visual confirmation of the Reaper's Eye, its sleek, arrowhead-shaped form striking fear into their hearts, destroying the sudden burst of morale they had gained in one fell swoop. As if that wasn't enough, the Reaper's Eye fired a series of missiles aimed not at the fighters, but at their freighters. With only 2 standard railgun turrets, it also fired at the ship at the rear of the formation. Its shields, weakened by the initial barrage, collapsed entirely as its PD turrets desperately shot down the missiles coming its way. Thanks to the sensor distortion field, their defenses had a hard time distinguishing between a real target and a fake signal, requiring manual human input to decide where and what to shoot. Their formation tightened to overlap their defenses, preventing them from making hard turns without risking a collision or friendly fire. They tried to return fire with their own railguns, but the Reaper's Eye proved to be maneuverable enough to swiftly dodge most of their attacks. Its shields flared occasionally, but they held strong. The exchange continued for several seconds until the last freighter received 2 railgun strikes to its engines, crippling it. Chaos erupted within their formation instantly a second later. The fighters, their resolve shattered, closed in with their freighters, now moving away from the battle entirely. They were running away. It was the moment he was looking for. Everyone with heavy damage, remain within the Reaper's Eye's protective sphere. The rest follow me. We'll force them to take the best route of escape, he exclaimed, not hearing the calls of acknowledgement from his wedge leaders and squad mates. Forcing the pirates into the desired trajectory proved all too easy as they moved in to harass them, making themselves a constant nuisance. Meanwhile, the Reaper's Eye fired a few more times upon the crippled freighter until its core was struck, leaving in its place a small, short-lived ball of light. The final move in his plan came to a close when they entered the minefield zone. Ordering his fighters to slow down and pretend to fall back, giving the pirates the security that they wouldn't be pursued anymore, and that they would escape with their lives. That hope ended when just a few seconds later, the now evident haywire mines activated, and every freighter and remaining fighter there suddenly went offline, becoming little more than hulks and easy target practice. Move in! Destroy everything. Save your missiles, he ordered whilst spearheading the formation. The plan had worked even better than he'd initially expected, thanks to the freighters also running away instead of trying to rejoin their fleet. Now all that was left to do was the cleanup operation. One by one, every fighter was destroyed, putting an end to their pilots, and tactical mines were latched onto the freighter's hull. When nothing more was left to be done, Wyatt ordered them to proceed with their real objective. Perhaps a few pirate fighters were still intact, floating in the inky black. He paid them no mind, and there was no compassion or sympathy in his heart for any of them who found a cold, slow death. Instead, a profound sense of satisfaction at a job well done warmed his chest. His only regret, the loss of so many pilots. But such was the nature of battle, tragic as it was. Once they were far enough away, the mines were detonated. With that, 4 freighters were gone, reduced to debris. As they flew, Wyatt expanded his tactical map and smiled at what he saw. The Noir Navio and the Reaper's Blade had been busy in the meantime. Noir Navio, command bridge. Redford Kalen sat on the captain's chair, linked to the ship itself once more. A jolt of thrilling success coursed through his spine the moment he felt 2 heavy laser turrets hit a pirate freighter, cutting through its hull and making it glow white-hot before yet another explosion filled the sky. The surviving heavy freighter had taken to the fight almost immediately after its companion was destroyed. Maybe its commander was driven by anger. Perhaps it was fear of facing Ezquerra Dante if he survived and thus chose a more indirect form of suicide. The most likely, he concluded, was simply that he hoped to survive an escape somehow. He wouldn't give it that chance. They were fighting with everything they had left, but it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. The Noir Navio's shields were holding strong, with the first holding at 61% and the second at 97%. Heat wasn't a terrible problem, as he had carefully chosen his targets and avoided using the plasma cannons, instead relying on his preferred weapon of choice, a combination of missile barrages, precise railgun strikes, and heavy lasers when needed. The torpedoes would be useful for the fight against Raven Tomb. After the destruction of the first heavy freighter, he joined the battle targeting the closest freighter, destroying it after a few railgun strikes and heavy lasers to finish the job. Then he moved to the next target, systematically destroying their combat vessels without mercy or remorse, only the assuredness of a gardener tearing away weeds. The pirates had also gone into disarray, and some of their ships tried to break off and flee, only to be intercepted by the Reaper's Blade and destroyed from afar, not giving them a chance to fight back. It pleased him that not all of George Lintar's kin were as stubbornly set in their dogmatic traditions and views on nobility and doctrine as the old fool was. To give the pirate commander in charge some credit, it wasn't an incompetent idiot. The decision to stop his fighters was a sound move under normal circumstances, but ultimately it accelerated the fleet's demise. A fleet of 28 ships had been reduced to only 12, with only the second heavy freighter and 2 other freighters left to protect their precious cargo ships. Their fighters have been destroyed by his PD turrets, too depleted to pose any serious threat after their efforts in stopping the opening Stapleyan assault. They tried to use their drones as suicide bombers, but were swiftly destroyed. The few that remained had either chosen to form around the cargo freighters or tried in vain to reach Raventomb's fleet, only to be destroyed by missiles launched by the Reaper's blade. Splitting a portion of his attention away from the battle, Redford touched on the strategic map and felt joy when he saw 92 fighters closing in on the cargo freighters, unable to do anything except wait. Another 9 fighters, including one of the composters he noticed, were flying close to the Reaper's eye. Damaged fighters, he concluded instantly. The toll in lives lost in the void had been, again, lower than his initial expectations, though he wished they could be 0 in such large operations. A warning alert brought his entire focus back into place as he saw the heavy freighter and its 2 escorts moving in for a ramming action. Simultaneously, he noticed that several life pods and transport shuttles were being launched from those ships, all of them heading to Rankov. Glaring at the ugly, boxy, and completely utilitarian ships devoid of any aesthetic appeal and marred by hundreds of markings across their hulls, Redford focused fire on the heavy freighter. Railgun strikes depleted what was left of its shields before the heavy lasers hit it in full, cutting through armor, hull, and superstructure with ease. Another volley of invisible heavy laser fire cut through the ship again, reaching its reactor. Yet another bright star illuminated the sky before the ship could ever hope to pose any genuine threat to the Nornavio. The 2 other freighters were dead less than a minute later with significantly less effort. The ramming attempt had been nothing more than a distraction to buy the survivors some time. A communication request from Wyatt caught his attention. Immediately, he accepted it. "Commander Redford, we've reached their cargo freighters and have successfully disabled them." "What are your orders?" A quick look revealed that indeed the black-haired man's claims rang true. "Return to the hangar for resupply. We'll begin the hunt within the hour." "Good job, Wyatt," ordered Redford. "Understood, Commander." "Wyatt, out." Redford allowed himself to let out a short sigh. The battle was still far from over. With a thought, he opened a link. "Captain Milcades, ready the troops for a ground assault." "Gladly," Milcades replied, his usual jovial, carefree tone replaced by deadly focus. Volantis, Errante Grand Palace. Neolo Errante wasn't blind to the situation his house was facing as he walked through the halls of his palace, 2 loyal servants following close behind. To the uneducated, the dullards, and the witless, everything that transpired was nothing more than a series of coincidences falling one after another, like dominoes. And to a degree there was some truth behind that line of thinking. But coincidence was nothing more than an after-effect, the unseen consequences of prior actions. The Astor agent was dead. That alone was bad. But the staples were gone, and with them all the possible machinations his parents had in mind were gone too. Worse, they had been taken away, sequestered quite literally in the middle of the night by unknown thieves. Then there were the Tygan prisoners and the actions of his brother, Tegan. The implications alone were enough to cause his father no small amount of distress. Finally, and worst of all, the weight of responsibility was balancing precariously over the shoulders of House Errante. It churned his stomach to think what consequences would come knocking at their palace's doors. That is, if they didn't act quickly, decisively, and swiftly. But first, he needed to know more about the one person around whom the storm of disaster threatening to bring down its fury upon House Errante actually was. Entering the practice fields of his house's guard militia, Neolo saw 120 men and women crawling on the ground under a series of very low laser nets. Meanwhile, Sergeant Warlow, wearing a slightly more adorned and better quality uniform than the rest, stared at them with a gaze that could best be translated as mounting disappointment. "They're hopeless, my lord," Warlow said before Neolo could open his mouth. "They'll be grateful for receiving the proper training instructed by a veteran, career military man such as yourself, Sergeant," Neolo said diplomatically. "Even if they aren't, I'll try to beat at least some proper discipline into them one way or another, Warlow replied, sighing as another head touched the laser line, followed by a beep and a short-lived electric shock coming from the bracelets he was wearing. Another body for cleaning duty, Warlow called loudly before turning to Neolo. Is there anything that you need of me, my lord? I need you to tell me more about Baron Staples, Sergeant. What little information we have is shamefully limited in details, Neolo admitted, but continued before the man could give him a non-committal answer. Yet I found a rather intriguing piece of forgotten information. One related to a Drazen raider attack nearly 15 years ago. Neolo paused as he felt his blood freeze as the old, weak man in front of him stared at him with an emptiness in his eyes that he'd never seen before. Adjusting his elegant red necktie, proudly displaying the heraldic shield of his house on it, he continued. Sergeant, no, Warlow Pincer, not only the honor, standing, prestige, power, and reputation of my house is facing risks you cannot begin to comprehend, but our very lives are also in very real danger. I need to know what kind of man he is now. I mean no disrespect, just understanding. With it, there is a chance that genuine action can be taken against those who took his family, he proclaimed firmly, almost in a pleading tone. Warlow remained silent for several moments, even ignoring 3 beeps coming from behind him. Finally, after a long minute of silence, he gave his answer. Do you truly want to know what kind of man he is? He asked. Neolo nodded twice. Warlow took a step forward. Neolo froze where he stood, his legs refusing to move as his eyes were locked with Warlow's. And despite the fact that the elderly man was looking up at him, it was he who felt insignificant under his stern, uncaring, piercing gaze. He could see it in his eyes. To him, he was nothing more than a young idiot, if that. Simple, Warlow continued, blinked once and turned around. He is dangerous. Neolo swallowed hard. For a long minute, he stared at Warlow's back as if it were an impassable wall of titanium. Then, with trembling, sweating hands, he turned around and left the field. More than ever, he needed to convince his father to take immediate action and inform their patrons, House Guimore, of what had transpired on Volantis for the survival of House Errante. Personally. Hello there, everyone. Echidna writes here. I wanted to tell you all that I'll be taking next week off to relax in preparation for the coming holidays. TBS will continue across Christmas and New Year's, and What's the Job and Barony of Screaming Forests will continue as normal. Thank you all for your love and support. I will see you all later.